All right, so today is October 5th, 2021. I'm not sure if I'm going to get this video posted up today or if I might wait until tomorrow, but what I do know is we're at the 1 year anniversary of the passing of Eddie Van Halen that occurred last year on October 6th, 2020. I've been thinking about Eddie for the last several weeks, actually, really honestly, constantly since he passed away. Me as a guitar player, as I've mentioned, obviously on several of these videos, and you see in the backdrop, obviously it's of no surprise. Since he passed away, and even since a little bit before, really, just thinking about him constantly, and I think just his legacy, not only on guitar players worldwide, but also on rock music, and not only just from the standpoint of his own playing, but even just the gear innovations. So I wanted to go ahead and make a video today and basically just share some of my own personal thoughts about Eddie Van Halen, just do my own little tribute, I guess, to him 1 year down the road. So I'll start off by basically, I guess, describing how I found out about his passing. Obviously October 6th, 2020, the day that he did pass away, I remember I had to go to the doctor and get checked out basically for a little health issue that was kind of bothering me at the time and has kind of come and gone ever since. But I remember like going in, getting checked out, and then, kind of being at a point where, you don't really know what the future holds as far as, what you're dealing with, all that sort of stuff. Get home, and then maybe, I don't know, about an hour later or whatever, get a text message from a really close friend, and she tells me, OMG, Eddie Van Halen died. And it's just like, that moment, just seeing that, it's like, wow, obviously it's like a kick in the gut if you're a, rock music fan and a guitar player for that matter. So it's just, again, just kind of, just for me, like just stunned, really, just taking it in that moment. I'd had some inkling that Eddie Van Halen, and I shouldn't even say myself, I think a lot of us fans who've kind of been following him or, say reading blabbermouth.net or just, again, if you're a guitar player, just really, I think just having a general interest in other players and just, what they're doing at any given point in their careers. I think a lot of us had some inklings that Eddie was, probably getting near the end. I remember it was late 2019, I think, that David Lee Roth, the Van Halen singer, had basically kind of in no uncertain terms basically shared that, Eddie was not in a good place as far as his health and said something along the lines of, that he may not be answering the 10 bell count this time, or I should say the 10 count, to the bell this time. And, so you obviously you read something like that and you figure that, well, I certainly hope that it's not going to be anytime soon. And I remember even finding that out. I feel like it would have been maybe November of 2019. I remember that night actually going back and listening to songs off of Van Halen's Balance album, which for me is actually where it all began, really. Which I'll mention that in a few minutes and elaborate more on it. But so again, you go back to last year, October 6th, and see the text message from your close friend, and just knowing that one of your heroes and one of the ultimate pioneers of rock guitar was gone, and really just knowing that I think that the rock guitar world would probably never be the same. And so I'll go ahead and apologize right now because this thing's probably going to be all over the place. There's a lot of different thoughts and just I think memories, if you will, that I have of Eddie Van Halen that I want to try to share at least as best as possible. But for me, it's kind of the way my brain works anyway. Is I jump from A to B a lot of times, sometimes back and forth. So I guess if I'm going to go back, even I mentioned Van Halen's Balance album. So I first heard that album in 2007, and it's probably not the best place to start off with Van Halen if you're, really wanting to know the ins and outs of Eddie Van Halen's guitar playing. But I remember I mentioned on this channel a few times, huge fan of Jeff Waters from Annihilator, and Jeff's basically gone on record and pretty much been very open about the fact that Eddie Van Halen's one of his top guitar players of all time, arguably actually his favorite. I think Jeff has said on record that Eddie was his favorite, but I remember just, really like reading a lot of like Jeff's thoughts about Van Halen and, of course, Eddie and just his playing and just the inspiration, all that sort of stuff. And I remember, of course, my dad, he was a huge fan of, hard rock, heavy metal music in the late 80s, early 90s. So I remember he had really taken an interest in Annihilator along with me. And I remember we were listening to some Annihilator stuff one night and we were just talking about Van Halen also and how Jeff had mentioned, that Eddie was a huge influence to him. And I remember Dad kind of posing the question to me, like, well, do you want to, hear where this all started? And I'm like, well, yeah, sure. Obviously I had some curiosity there. So he had Van Halen's album Balance on CD and put it in. And I'm assuming that Dad was thinking that I wasn't going to like it because I was only 17 years old at the time, and I was like diehard into like just purely thrash metal only. Again, your Metallica, Anthrax, Annihilator, stuff like that. And I think he was expecting that when we put Van Halen's Balance on, that I'd want to, within 30 seconds, 2 minutes or whatever, have it shut off. But I remember the opening track, The Seventh Seal, playing, and obviously totally different than what I was into at the time. But it's like immediately upon listening to it, it's like you could really hear, I think, where a lot of that influence came from. And what I mean is just, the influence that Eddie had basically, kind of pushed on to so many guitar players just, once he first got started, or I should say when he first got big in the late 70s. Obviously balanced that era. Sammy Hagar was the singer of Van Halen, much different than the David Lee Roth era, maybe not as guitar driven, obviously, as what they were doing in the 70s up through the mid 80s. But, I think Eddie Van Halen's guitar influence definitely could still be felt on the Sammy Hagar albums, and again, balance included. So I remember Dad and I are listening back to this, and I thought it was great stuff. It's one of those things where I think like the barometer really of if you like something is can you hold your head up high, while it's playing. And for me, definitely. And I remember Dad just kind of shrugging his shoulders, like, I can't believe that you're into this. But I really liked it. So again, as a 17-year-old kid, that was my first real exposure to Van Halen and his music. So now going back to what I was saying about jumping from A to B, I remember right around that same time, it would have been, again, 2007 and even a little bit before that, late 2006. And there was a lot of rumors of maybe not even rumors, there was just a lot of talk about the launch of the new Eddie Van Halen guitar brand, EVH, the collaboration with him and Fender Musical Instrument Corporation. And the idea was that EVH was going to basically do like a line of amplifiers and cabinets, and I think they were also going to be releasing the Eddie Van Halen Frankenstein guitar, or I should say the replica of it. And I remember reading a lot of coverage in Guitar World magazine about the brand and just really taking an interest in it, and just, wondering about the stuff. In Guitar World, obviously, when they're reviewing things like, again, equipment lines and such, they're pretty extensive about it. So I remember, there was no shortage of the amount of things you could read about it, obviously with the specifications of the then new at the time Eddie Van Halen EVH 5153 amplifier. So again, I was very interested in that. I, just thought it was really cool. I obviously read in those same articles about his legacy with Peavey. Obviously, they did two amplifiers, the 5150, the original, then the 5152, and that was a legacy in itself, which I'll try to touch on a little bit later. But so reading about the EVH brand and all that, really getting a first awareness of it. And I remember, I think the time that it really started to hit home for me was probably about a year after that. And again, I'm talking about 2007 as the initial part of this. About a year after 2008, really still, being like a metal fan and all that sort of stuff, getting into different bands. And I remember roughly April 2008, Testament getting ready to release their album, The Formation of Damnation. And again, Guitar World doing a lot of interviews and such, and press, if you will, for the record. And I remember they were interviewing Eric Peterson, the rhythm guitar player, and they had asked Eric, what was your amplifier of choice for this record? And they kind of made the bold assumption: is this a Mesa Boogie triple rectifier or dual rectifier, whatever he was using at the time? And I remember Eric's answer in the interview question was like, he was straight up about it. It's like, no, I'm endorsed by Mesa Boogie, but no, I use the EVH 5153 on this album. And I remember hearing the record a couple weeks later, or right around the same time, whenever it was. And I don't think it was the best Testament album, but sound wise, the rhythm guitar was really, really good. And in retrospect, looking back, the album I think was really good too. But sound wise, the rhythm guitar just really thick, really chunky, all that sort of stuff. Everything you look for in a heavy metal guitar tone. And again, courtesy of the EVH 5153. That was the first in several different occurrences over the next number of years where you basically hear about players that were playing through this amplifier, even outside of their endorsements, and they had nothing but good things to say about it. And that's kind of unprecedented, really, in the music industry, because usually if you're endorsed by a company, say for a guitar or an amplifier you're using, you're normally only allowed to talk about that amplifier, only, say whatever good things about that one, and you don't talk about anything else whatsoever. I remember late 2010, Scott Ian doing a clinic. There's a video here on YouTube that covers the entire thing where he was doing a clinic for Randall Amplifiers, the company he was endorsed by at the time. And, he was talking about obviously the influence and the inspiration behind his Randall amps. And he, in no uncertain terms, actually even said, it's like, oh, yeah, one of my favorite amplifiers of the past few years is the EVH 5150. And he talked about trying to model one of the tones on his Randall amplifier after channel 3 of the EVH 5153. And so I thought that was the coolest thing, again, that there was another example of it. Then, a couple years later, Jeff Waters from Annihilator, no surprise, because he's a huge Eddie Van Halen fan, he announces that he's endorsed by EVH, and I think it was for a year or two, was singing the praises of the EVH 5153 amp. And again, that's just three examples basically of players, obviously, who you know singing the praises of the EVH equipment, and for good reason. And I remember, and this is the key, I think, for endorsements. A lot of times these guys, whether they're actually endorsed by the company or not, if they sing the praises of a particular brand, well, as a guitar player, if you're into that same kind of music, you you get curious about it, you want to check it out. So I remember in my own guitar journey wanting to upgrade to a new amplifier and really try to like hot rod my sound or kickstart it, so to speak. So I think it was late 2011 they introduced the 50-watt version of the EVH 5153 head, and wanted to give it a shot. So working at the time, buy one. It was on back order. It comes in a couple months later, unexpectedly, on a rainy day in March of 2013. Plug it in into my speaker cabinet I had, and played through it. And it was pretty much everything I wanted, and then some. It's kind of like, I think when you're growing up and you don't realize a lot of these things with a guitar, you think a lot of these heavy metal guys, they're getting their tones through distortion boxes or whatever, and maybe have a couple of them lined up going into whatever amplifier they're using, and you don't really realize a lot of times really that the best sounds that you can get out of an amplifier usually are when you plug direct in, and that the sound's already in the amp itself. So it was like mission accomplished as far as getting the EVH and playing through it and just feeling like that the sound was certainly there. So I pretty much was an EVH fan for life at that point. Like I said, that was the 50-watt head. Still have that to this day. And I remember a few years ago wanting to get the EVH 5153, the EL34 version. It's like a different tube set, 100 watts. I wanted to see what the difference was going to be. I remember buying it, plugging it into the cabinet that I had, and I was shocked because it sounded exactly the same, at least to my ears anyway. Maybe a little bit disappointed initially because I'd spent a lot of money on it, but again, considering where we are a year later, I'm actually extremely happy that I have that EL34 amp now, because it's kind of like the ultimate tribute or continuing the legacy, if you will. Just, I don't know, for me, just wanting, I guess, to represent the EVH brand and just be, I guess, just play through something that I'm really proud of. And the thing is, even though that 100-watt EL34 head to me sounds very, very similar, if not the exact same as the 50-watt, it doesn't mean it sucks. I think it sounds really, really good, actually. The 100-watt head, obviously packs a ton of a wallop. And again, maybe a slightly different flavor there, but I think if you're a thrash metal guitar player or even into death metal and such, it's kind of like it's the quintessential metal amp, I think. It's, you can, basically if you're looking for a little bit more of a scooped out, like heavy metal type sound, you can put like a graphic equalizer in the effects loop, scoop out a little bit of the mids, and you pretty much have everything you need. I don't think you need, like, say, a Mesa Boogie or like a several $1,000 Wagner or any of that sort of stuff. That's just my opinion. But again, I'm a pretty much an EVH devotee for life after experiencing these two amps and just really just learning firsthand just the amount of distortion and wallop basically that they pack just in the box. So that's kind of getting off the beaten path a little bit. But again, that's just my experience with the gear so far with the EVH heads, and who knows, maybe we'll buy some other ones in the future because there's a couple other revisions of the amplifier heads that I don't have. And as something of a gear junkie, kind of always keeping my eyes out there, to see if anything comes available and maybe might jump on it. So, anyways, going back though to Eddie Van Halen though, because again, I got off the beaten track a little bit. I don't think it can't be understated just how much of an influence Eddie was, again, just on guitar players worldwide. And you're talking about like just the usage of like the tapping, the really fast scaler, the really fast modal scale type playing, just the overall shredding. It's like basically, at the time when Van Halen 1, the first album came out, I want to say it was 77 or 78. The world hadn't really heard a guitar player like that yet who basically took everything and just jacked it up to 10 and, just went for it and played as fast as possible. It basically was ushering in a whole new era of, guitar shredding extraordinaires that would basically come onto the scene over the next, 15 plus years and even up through today, basically as the shred revolution is, basically in full swing again. And I think the funny thing is, though, throughout all of that, all the years and the players, that have come and gone, and, even obviously the ones that came up and are still with us and are still contributing, there's always that saying, often imitated but never equaled. And I think that applies, extremely well to Eddie Van Halen. One of his big techniques, I think the one that, any guitar player knows that is, or knows of that Eddie is most associated with is fretboard tapping. And it's funny, really, because Eddie Van Halen, and even outside of the fretboard tapping, but more so the tapping than anything else, it's one of those techniques where eons of players have tried to replicate it, and a lot of people they can pretty much play it this, or they can play the technique like the same way as Eddie Van Halen. They can do like the same speed, they can play the same runs, sound them out clearly, and they sound great. But yet, it's funny that I don't think there's a single player to this day that managed to sound exactly like Van Halen, because a lot of things, or a lot of times, I think us players, we get our folks that we're really inspired and influenced by, and you try to a T to copy everything they're doing. Because you want to be just like them. They say that imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, right? So you have so many players that have tried to copy Eddie Van Halen's signature style, and they've gotten really close, but nobody's been able to pull it off and sound exactly like the man himself. And I don't think this was any more apparent than one of Eddie's final live appearances. And I remember this was a video I saw on YouTube I think it was about 6 years ago, actually, right around this time. Or I'm sorry, it would have been 5 years ago, because it was late 2016. And it was Van Halen's appearance at the Hollywood Bowl. I want to say the date was October 2nd of 2015 was the show they played. And it turned out, as time would reveal, that it was one of the last performances of not only Van Halen, but just of Eddie Van Halen himself. And obviously, he did like one of his customary 10, 15-minute guitar solos where he's just on stage by himself, just wailing away, just ripping as fast as possible. And I remember watching this, and it just really stood out to me because it was an interesting time in my life. That's how I can remember it so clearly. I was getting ready to leave a job that I just wasn't really fond of anymore, and I remember just kind of sitting there, really plotting what my next move was going to be. And watching this video on YouTube and just seeing Eddie shredding away. And at that point, it was more apparent to me than ever that nobody had, in all those years of him, just playing, touring, putting out records, and so many other people doing the same thing. It was so obvious to me that not a single person had managed to copy him, to a T. And I think that's the ultimate mark of a guitar player, is when you can come up with your own style that people can certainly strive to emulate, but that nobody can ever copy it completely, and they can never sound completely like you. It's one of the hardest things in the world to develop that individuality. I mean, I've been trying to do it for 17 years, and I don't know even necessarily that I've been able to completely do that. I'm sure there'd be people that probably hear me that say there's an individuality there, but for me, I've always just tried to, not so much copy, but I've tried to take things from other players, that I really like, try to do things that I think are cool that they do, and you try to morph it into your own style. But again, I think Eddie Van Halen, one of the ultimate masters of it. Just again what I was mentioning with the gear, the EVH brand, the 5153 amplifier and the numerous revisions they've done with it. His legacy even stretches back, going back to the early 90s again, as far as the gear innovations, because of his collaboration with Peavey, which I mentioned earlier. Them doing the Peavey 5150, the 5152. These are amps that were universally revered in their own right. Basically just looked upon as like the golden children of, what you needed to basically create heavy metal music. I remember when Eddie left Peavey, they rebranded the amplifier 6505, which was to, I guess, represent like the first 40 years of Peavey's legacy, when they started in 1965 and then rebranded the amplifier in 2005. And I remember hearing a 6505 through one of my close friends a few years ago at his house, and he was playing the 6505 Plus, which it was the original 5152, but they renamed it Plus. He was playing this amplifier through a Randall cabinet, loaded with vintage 30s. And I remember, I think we jacked the volume up to like 3 or 4 or whatever, and it was just like already like just starting to rattle up the windows and just really, really loud. So at the time, it represented basically the best live in the room sound that I had ever heard. And again, it's like obviously that Eddie Van Halen designed amplifier is a huge reason for that. I remember like even like just going out wanting to get like my own Randall cabinet just to try to basically emulate that same sound. Got that cabinet, and then I put my EVH 5153, the original 50-watt head that I had, put it through the cabinet, and it was the same sound. It's just like, man, it's like this is just incredible stuff. So again, it's like, I wanted to really like emphasize that and touch on that, because it's like, not only again Eddie Van Halen, just the legacy from his playing, but just the gear innovations. I mean, there was obviously a time just in guitar history, I should say, electric guitar specifically. There was a time where you couldn't walk into a store or buy stuff on the internet, and have it shipped to your house or bring it home from the store or whatever, and be able to plug it into, a cabinet or whatever, and basically just have that sound right there. We all have Eddie Van Halen to thank for that. Even stretching back, I mentioned the Frankenstein guitar early on in this video. The whole, Obviously it's a classic story at this point that pretty much almost every electric guitar player knows, at least ones that are into rock music anyway. But Eddie basically takes like a secondhand, Fender knockoff body, bolts a secondhand Fender neck onto it, routes the electronics cavity out to basically fit a humbucker pickup in it instead of a single coil pickup. Little did we realize at the time that Eddie Van Halen basically invented the Super Strat, which would be a staple of rock and heavy metal music for years and years to come. I mean, one of my favorite shapes to play on to this day is the Super Strat. Companies like Jackson, ESP, Ibanez, the list goes on, but they all create, basically these shapes again, like this, the Super Strat shape. And, it's gone on to be one of the most popular body designs in the world, not only because I think just ergonomically really easy to play, but, feels really good to play standing up live and just overall just a really balanced tone that you get out of it depending on the tone wood. So again, we have Eddie Van Halen to thank for that. It was really at the end of the day all because he just wanted to tinker with things, just wanted to try different stuff. And in his own words, basically, these at the time, again, the mid 70s at that point, companies didn't make anything that he wanted to use that would convey the sound that he was looking for, just I think in his own head and just with his ears. So again, we have Eddie Van Halen to thank for all of this. I'll even go on a limb and say basically that this video I'm making right now wouldn't be possible, without Eddie Van Halen. You can't see in the room right now, but got the EVH 5150 heads, sitting here. I don't really play through my EVH much at this point, but that's not or I don't play through the EVH as much at this point, but that's not so much a knock on Van Halen. I want to get away from tubes and basically try out new solid state technology. So nowadays I use a Axe FX2 and Matrix GT1000 power amp. Yet it's funny though because just going through the different patches and the different amplifier models, the one that I settled on after a long time of searching, lo and behold, the EVH 5153. So I think just that familiarity and just that again that gain structure, just a really it's like a Marshall sound on steroids basically, which is not surprising when you consider that Eddie Van Halen's original amplifier was I want to say it was either a Marshall 1959 Plexi or a JCM 800. Can't remember for sure exactly which one, but I know it was a Marshall. And as the old legend goes, basically plugging it into a variac device, lowering the wattage down to 89 watts from the stock 100 watts, and just turning everything up to 10 and just going for it. That's even another one that I'll touch on, just the legacy of the tone, even just I think in recorded heavy metal music. Van Halen 1 comes out, and I think the main signature songs, obviously Eruption, Running with the Devil, You Really Got Me, songs like that really I think were the blueprint basically for what rock and metal guitar playing were about to become. And the biggest thing I think is not only just the playing itself, but the guitar tone. You're talking the late 70s, and Eddie's basically working with tones that were more or less the prototype of some of the sounds that bands like Metallica and Anthrax would later use. Like say 5 years down the road, maybe even backing up. There's even another I think good example. Judas Priest put out an album in 1982 called Screaming for Vengeance, and the sounds that they were using on the album, not quite the heavy amounts of distortion and guitar thickness that would be heard, on albums that were released a few years later. But yet, what they were doing in 1982, they were considered one of the forerunners of heavy metal music at that time. Yet, the sounds that they were playing through at that time in 1982 were still behind that of what Eddie Van Halen had achieved, just by, again, using that Variac and that Marshall amplifier. And again, that's all because of Eddie Van Halen, just that want to tinker and that want to, as he once put it in his own words, basically wanting to get a little bit more gas in the tank, so to speak. And again, I can't say enough. It's just this whole world of guitars, amplifiers, and all that. Again, it doesn't exist without Eddie Van Halen. I don't really know what else to say. So, I'm not really sure where else I'm going with this. I think I'm getting to a point where I'm probably going to go ahead and wrap it up. It just I don't know. Just again, it's kind of surreal, really. Actually, also, if I'm going to go in another direction with it, it's really surreal that here we are a year later and then he's gone. And obviously we've all had a lot of time to think about it, and just knowing that there's not going to be another player that's going to come in anytime soon that's going to flip the entire guitar world upside down. I think my biggest regret really was unfortunately never getting the chance to actually meet Eddie and shake his hand, or better yet, never even getting the chance to see Van Halen live. I think certainly anybody who got to see Van Halen, especially in Eddie's prime, they were certainly lucky. I think they should absolutely consider themselves fortunate that they were able to do so. So with that, that's pretty much all of my thoughts on Van Halen. Oh, I remember now. There was one more thing that I wanted to mention. The or the most recent continuation of, I guess, my personal tributes or ties to the to Eddie Van Halen and the EVH brand. Recently I've been trying to play for some people. Sometimes obviously for me, I think as you can kind of tell by watching these videos, I'm not necessarily the most comfortable person speaking in front of a camera. That also means I'm not necessarily the most comfortable person playing for others. But been trying to make a little bit more of a habit over the last little while, just to make an effort to play in front of people. I don't know. I guess just try to get out of that stage fright a little bit. And I remember playing some acoustic guitar actually at a party recently for a friend for his housewarming, and it didn't go overwhelmingly well, but it didn't go terrible either. It's not like everybody was, dumping on my playing saying I was terrible. So I'm not much of an acoustic guitar player. I'm obviously my big hallmark is electric, as you can see by the one sitting in the back there. But my thought was, it's like, okay, well, maybe I can buy a 2x12 cabinet and, take it to parties or whatever and play for some folks, bring along like an iPod or, have the songs on my cell phone or whatever and just jam along with some stuff and just, I don't know, do like 5, 6 song concert or show, if you will, at parties or whatever. So the first brand I thought of, for buying a cabinet was EVH. Obviously just knowing how successful the legendary amplifier heads were, it's like, well, let's see what these cabinets are all about. Found a decent deal on a 2x12 cabinet, got it shipped in, and played through it. And within 2 minutes, it's that same thing. It's like I don't know necessarily that it was better than my Randall cabinet. It's kind of like an apples to oranges kind of thing. And on any given day, might like one more than the other, but it doesn't mean that one's worse than the other. It's just kind of a preference thing and just how your tastes are on that given day. Just what flavor you're looking for. But I remember immediately just plugging through the EVH 2x12, and it was just like the sound's there, and it's just my goodness, just again a continuation of that legacy. And so we all have Eddie Van Halen to thank again. I've said it a million times, but just for this gear revolution and just the choices that we have, and just if you're a heavy metal guitar player, it's a wonderful time really to be a guitar player navigating on this journey. You have so many options at your disposal as far as equipment, again, guitars, amplifiers, heads, cabinets, all of that sort of stuff. And we have Eddie Van Halen to thank for it. So it's a year later, one year later, the legacy of Eddie Van Halen lives on, and it's always going to be safe. I think I said on my Alexi Laiho video at the beginning of this year, just kind of stating at the time, maybe with some uncertainty, but looking back, definitely the legacy safe for Alexi Laiho. But I could say with 100% certainty that Eddie Van Halen's legacy is absolutely safe. Just the amount of lives that he touched with his music, and again, just the gear innovations, the lives of all the guitar players, myself included, that he touched personally. Um, and I'll sign off on one final moment, or one final thing that I wanted to just touch on really briefly. When I first started playing in 2004, you'd watch a lot of the live DVDs from your favorite bands, see different videos and see like these epic moments of guitar players, where they're ripping their way through a great solo, or, just playing their way through one of your favorite songs, and just you watch it and you just nod your head and it's like, man, that's epic. That's absolutely awesome. I haven't had very many of those moments here in these last number of years, because just I think as you get older and that mystery of the guitar kind of disappears the more you get into it, again, you just don't have as many of those moments. I had one recently, though, about 2 or 3 weeks ago, just, knowing that this date was coming up, and seeing a video on YouTube of Van Halen sound checking on the streets of Los Angeles. And I think it was for an appearance for Jimmy Kimmel Live. And Eddie's just walking in the area basically where the crowd would have been, I think just kind of getting the feel for the sound. But they're playing Running with the Devil, and Eddie's just kind of sauntering away with this swagger while he's playing. And I kid you not, it was the most epic thing I'd ever seen. And I'm 31 years old now, again, been playing for 17 years, and that was the most epic thing I'd ever seen. I'd realized that that song is not necessarily the most difficult song in the world if you're a guitar player or a rock player for that matter, but when I saw that, just Eddie just walking through, just calm and cool and just playing that, it's just like, man, that's got to be the coolest thing I've ever seen, and just again, epic. I'll be dead honest, when I saw it, it actually made me tear up a little bit. I think just not only out of sheer joy, but again, just knowing that Eddie's gone, and unfortunately, we can't have him back, but we can say that we were extremely blessed to have him for all the years that we did. So I just wanted to sign off though on that note, just commenting on how epic that I thought that was, and may always be the most epic moment of all time for me, just seeing a guitar player working his magic. So thank you so much to Eddie Van Halen. Rest in peace. Thank you to the viewers for watching. Take care.